again commercializes her two children, who I think are increasingly troubled when you look at what she's putting out there. And even Tom Sykes of The Royalist is saying there's hypocrisy at the heart of Meghan's Easter post of her kids, because the Sussex children are now central to a public image machine that sits awkwardly with bring in the faceless children. Here they go again.
Here they go.
Easter Sunday dropped two totally different royal vibes, and the contrast says everything about where things stand right now. In spring 2026 at Windsor, William and Catherine showed up at St George's Chapel with George, Charlotte and Louis. 5 of them, walking in sync, dressed sharp, calm and completely in control of the moment. The kids aren't little anymore. They move with that quiet confidence. They already understand the weight of what they represent without looking stressed by it.
Like figure, held back from the rest of the world, trapped in the castle. Oh, and she did remember at the end that she could show the least favourite child too.
The next morning, every major British newspaper ran with that exact image. The Sunday papers, Daily Express, Daily Mirror, Daily Telegraph, The Times. All of them picked the same shot. No confusion, no debate. Just one clear message splashed everywhere. The future of the monarchy is right there, lined up and solid. Meanwhile, over in Montecito, a totally different type of Easter story played out. Meghan dropped content on Instagram. Clips and photos showing the back of Lily's head. A plush toy, a chicken, some eggs, and later a skiing video of Archie with Harry on the slopes. That contrast. Yeah, it wasn't random on either side. What really matters is what those images say.
Has sailed thanks to the Duchess, their duplicity and lack of loyalty.
The Windsor side screams continuity, responsibility, and a kind of genuine warmth from a family that shows up publicly without turning it into a spectacle. Those Windsor kids are growing inside a visible tradition. They're learning how to represent something bigger than themselves, just like the generations before them. There's structure there, purpose, and real meaning behind every appearance. Even small moments, like the king briefly placing a hand on Louis's shoulder, carry serious weight and symbolism. Now flip back to Montecito and the message shifts. Tom Sykes from The Royalist nailed it perfectly. The partial angles, the quick glimpses, the carefully chosen shots. That approach doesn't fully protect privacy. Instead, it gives just enough to keep people watching, hinting that maybe something bigger is coming next. That kind of move has a name in media. It's called a tease. It's all about creating curiosity, feeding just enough to keep attention locked in without giving the full picture. It's a strategy used in content creation to keep audiences hooked, not something you usually see from parents whose main focus is simply keeping their kids out of the spotlight. This kind of strategy isn't random. It's used by people who fully understand how attention works and how to keep eyes locked in. And in this case, it involves using carefully controlled glimpses of their children as part of that system.
Harry has made himself one of the most vocal, high-profile critics of the digital economy's effects on children, while Meghan is using one of the world's biggest social platforms to circulate images of their own children to millions. Their defenders argue there is a difference between sharing controlled family content and exposing children to uncontrolled online exploitation. Their critics will say that distinction is wearing thin. Every new post featuring Archie...
That's where the contrast with Harry's public stance gets sharp, almost impossible to ignore. He's spent years positioning himself as a major voice, warning that platforms like Instagram can seriously harm young people. He's talked at major summits, pushed the idea that the digital world is damaging to kids' well-being, and framed it as a public health issue that isn't being taken seriously enough. It's become a core part of his post-royal identity. But at the same time, his wife is posting carefully edited, partial glimpses of their children to one of the biggest social platforms on the planet, for millions to see. Supporters will say there's a difference here. They argue that controlled, intentional family content isn't the same as the chaotic, harmful exposure Harry warns about. They'll say sharing Easter clips isn't equal to the algorithm-driven problems he speaks against. And sure, on the surface, that sounds reasonable. Parents have always shared moments of their kids' lives with others. But that argument starts to fall apart when you look at the bigger picture, the business behind it. Meghan's Instagram isn't some private space for close friends and family. It's a full-scale public brand channel, followed by millions, designed to promote products, shape an image, and keep attention flowing toward their business ventures. So when Archie and Lily show up there, it's not just casual family sharing anymore. Their presence plays a role in that system. They're part of the overall brand image, whether people want to admit it or not. And those partial reveals,
desperate and deeply hypocritical, continuously weaponizing Archie and Lilibet against the royals and using them as brand identity is astonishing, given that Harry has so publicly expressed his own resentment at being drawn into a public-facing brand narrative for the royals without his own consent.
That's not just about privacy. It lines up perfectly with how content is built to keep people curious and coming back for more. Then there's the skiing clip, which adds another layer to everything. It shows Harry and Archie on the slopes, framed as a relaxed father-son holiday moment. But around the same time, another photo surfaced. Harry skiing with Eugenie, looking upbeat, completely separate from any group shot that included Meghan. That detail didn't go unnoticed, and it shifts how people read the whole situation. Now here's where things start getting messy, and people are asking real questions. Was Meghan even on that ski trip at all? Or is that family holiday video more of a polished version of reality rather than a straight-up moment captured in real time? Observers have been circling this for a while now, and there's still no clear answer. It gets even more confusing when you line up the details. This is the same person who reportedly struggled to get on a toboggan at the Invictus Games. Yet suddenly there's skiing footage out there? Add in the timing, the setting, and that separate photo of Harry on the slopes with Eugenie, and it stops looking like a simple, wholesome Easter getaway. Something about it just doesn't line up cleanly. Now shift over to the Beatrice and Eugenie situation, because this is where things turn from confusing to strategic. Who showed up at Windsor for Easter, and more importantly, who didn't, is a major signal in the ongoing power dynamic between Charles and William. And the list of absences this year, it's hard to ignore. Prince Andrew wasn't there, Sarah Ferguson wasn't there, Beatrice and Eugenie also missing. Their husbands, their kids, completely absent. The entire York side of the family, who just a year ago were seen warmly alongside Charles at Ascot, suddenly nowhere to be found at one of the most public royal gatherings of the year.
Children grow up and they embrace these wonderful, lovely roles that they had that are very unique and interesting, and this service and duty to the country, which is so wonderful and lovely to see. It's so cool that we see royals sort of grow up and just embrace their destiny in so many amazing ways. We have a lot of royals who have reached the age of maturity recently. So that's just, as a royal watcher.
Officially, the line is that Beatrice and Eugenie could have attended, but chose not to. But that wording raises eyebrows. As Tom Sykes points out, that kind of phrasing feels familiar. It echoes how Andrew's step back was first described as voluntary, before it became something much more permanent. When the palace says something was a choice, it's fair to ask, whose choice was it really? And what kind of pressure sat behind that decision? Because according to multiple reports, one name keeps coming up at the centre of it all. William. His stance has been clear and consistent. He will not attend royal events where members of the York family are present. No mixing, no exceptions. And look at the Easter service. William was there with his family alongside the King and Queen, and the Yorks were not. That's not random. That's a pattern. It shows exactly how much influence William now has over who is visibly in and who is kept at a distance when it comes to the monarchy's public image. But here's where it gets even more layered. In that very same week, The Sun reported that King Charles is planning to invite Beatrice and Eugenie to Royal Ascot, one of the most high-profile, carefully staged events on the royal calendar. This isn't some quiet family lunch behind closed doors. Ascot is a huge, highly choreographed public event, one of the monarchy's biggest showcases. And now, Charles is reportedly planning to bring Beatrice and Eugenie into that spotlight, right after they were missing from Easter. That kind of switch-up? It stands out, and people are noticing. You can't really argue that their absence from Easter was just a casual personal choice, if, at the same time, they're being welcomed into something as high profile as Ascot.
And I obviously will come to the bizarre Meghan video post, but you contrast that with the total isolation of the two prisoners of Montecito, and specifically their isolation from the British royal family.
Yes, and you think about it as well, Dan, when it comes to Charles and Louis, we've always seen that they've had this special bond.
That logic doesn't hold steady. Either they're considered part of the active royal circle, or they're being kept at a distance. There's no clean middle ground here. And that's where the mixed signals start to look like something bigger. On one side, you've got the Easter exclusion, which many tie to William's camp. On the other, there's this Ascot invitation coming straight from Buckingham Palace. That split paints a clear picture of two different approaches clashing behind the scenes. This is exactly the tension Tom Sykes has been pointing to, a real ongoing disagreement about the direction of the monarchy, playing out in public view. Charles, by nature, leans toward family unity. He sees Beatrice and Eugenie as his nieces first, not as extensions of their father's situation. There's long-standing affection there, and he's not quick to cut them off. William, though, is looking at the institution through a sharper lens. His view lines up with a large chunk of public opinion. There's concern that any close association with Andrew's past issues brings reputational risk the monarchy can't afford right now. And he's not just thinking it, he's acting on it. He's using the influence he has, especially his presence at major events, to draw a firm line. If William doesn't attend, the tone of coverage shifts, the energy changes, and the public response isn't the same. That gives his position serious weight. So Charles ends up facing a tough call every time. Prioritize unity, or prioritize the image William is trying to protect.
Life, she just wanted to utilize it to catapult herself, what she thought would be, into greater stardom. The British royal family is warm. They embrace each other. They are family. They obviously have some blended families, and I think that's beautiful to see.
At Easter, that decision clearly leaned toward William's side, but the Ascot move shows Charles isn't ready to lock that in as the long-term plan. The result? Mixed messaging that's hard to ignore. Are Beatrice and Eugenie inside the fold, or are they being kept at arm's length? Is the York family being gradually phased out, or selectively, included when it suits the moment? The signals keep shifting, and that lack of clarity creates real questions. And that uncertainty points to a bigger issue that's been building. Multiple observers have noted that Charles has struggled to make the kind of firm, decisive calls these situations demand. Whether it's the fallout from Harry's exit or the ongoing complications tied to Andrew, the pattern feels the same. Delays, balancing acts, and no clean resolution in sight. What we're seeing here is a pattern. Charles leaning on delay and ambiguity instead of laying down clear, firm direction. And right now, the York family situation is the clearest example of that approach, or the lack of one. William, on the other hand, is moving very differently. His stance on the York family, clear, consistent and enforced, even if it creates tension with his own father. And it doesn't stop there. His position on any possible reconciliation with Harry is just as firm. The trust gap, the need for private promises to actually be kept before anything public happens. It's all been spelled out without confusion. He's stepping into the space where tough calls have to be made, the ones Charles has been hesitating on. And that difference showed up loud and clear on Easter Sunday. Those front pages, they belonged to William, not because he staged anything, but because the optics naturally lined up with his vision. A united Wales family front and a noticeable absence of the Yorks created a powerful visual without a single word needing to be said. That image told a story. A monarchy focused on the future, with defined boundaries about who is part of that picture and who isn't. No mixed signals, no guessing games, just a clean, controlled message. But here's where things get tricky again. Charles is expected at Ascot, and the York princesses are reportedly on the guest list too. That puts William in a tight spot. He's already made it very clear how he handles events involving the York family, so does that rule apply here? Or does Ascot suddenly become an exception?
showing you. Honestly, I think for most people that is more aggravating than anything else. Celebrities are able to have children and have social medias where their children aren't a part of it. And Meghan Markle, her social media strategy is all over the place. I mean, sometimes I think she says she wants it to be like her personal Instagram, but it's like public, but it's like it doesn't work.
This is how the tension between the two royal households keeps playing out. Through attendance, through visibility, through moments that seem small but carry major meaning. Every appearance becomes a signal. Every absence raises questions. And still, that Easter image stands above everything else. 5 figures walking towards St. George's Chapel. That's the visual that defines this moment in the royal timeline. It represents the future, and despite all the complications swirling around the institution right now, that image feels steady, controlled, and secure. Compare that to the Montecito Easter posts. The partial shots, the back of the head moments, the carefully held back glimpses. That kind of content fades fast. It doesn't stick in the same way. It doesn't carry the same weight. So when you break it all down, the contrast almost writes itself. William's vision, visible, structured, and gaining ground. Charles's approach, less defined, creating friction instead of clarity. The York family, caught somewhere in between, not fully in, fully out. And over in Montecito, a child's face barely shown on Instagram, while Harry continues speaking out against the very platform being used. That contrast is hard to ignore, and honestly, the details of that Easter content deserve a closer look, because they say a lot about where the Sussex media strategy stands right now. This goes past the obvious contradiction in Harry's anti-social media messaging. It cuts deeper into how this whole strategy is actually playing out. Meghan's return to Instagram came with serious hype. It was framed like a major comeback. The Duchess stepping back into the spotlight, building a direct line to her audience, creating that authentic lifestyle content brands rely on. The expectation from their side, momentum, attention, growth, but that never really showed up. Instead of climbing, the follower count has reportedly been slipping, and the engagement not hitting the level you'd expect for an account that's supposed to power a full commercial strategy.
It's beautiful grounds, but it just seems like their whole life is pretty empty. And their children, I mean, I'm sure they go to school, I'm sure they have friends, but there was I think some weird mention from Megan how like they almost kind of had to like force people to come over to their house and play with their kids because I think Meghan Markle is quite a weird person and I think
Then there's the content itself. And this is where the confusion kicks in. The cheeseboard email, the flower arrangement tutorial that doesn't actually teach anything, the Easter clips showing only the back of a child's head. People aren't reacting with excitement. They're reacting with raised eyebrows. That Lily video especially has people talking, and not in a good way. Some commentators have straight up called it flat, melancholy, even lifeless. And when you actually look at it closely, you can see why. It shows a child from behind holding a stuffed toy, standing alone in what looks like a huge private outdoor space. No other kids, no cousins, no friends, just one small figure in a very big setting. This is supposed to represent freedom, right? The post-royal life, the California ease, the idea of escaping structure to create something more natural and relaxed. But the way it comes across, it feels quiet in a way that doesn't read as peaceful. It reads as isolated. Now compare that to the Wales children. They're seen at events, interacting, growing up in environments where they're around other kids, building friendships, moving through shared experiences. It's not about who has more freedom in a literal sense. It's about the kind of world they're growing up in. George, Charlotte, and Louis still have structure, security, all of that. But they're also plugged into a wider social rhythm. School life, public moments, community spaces, those things matter for development, and it shows in how they carry themselves. So it raises a real question. Does the Montecito version of childhood offer that same connection? Because the content being shared doesn't really show it. That image, a child alone, with a toy in a massive private space, sends a very specific message, whether that was the intention or not. And the key point? That message doesn't fully match the one Meghan seems to be aiming for. It doesn't sell warmth, connection, or vibrant family life. It lands differently. Now, the skiing clip shifts the tone a bit. It's more active, more upbeat, and this time Harry is right there in the frame, bringing a different kind of energy to it. But even that contrast just highlights how uneven the overall content strategy feels right now, and why people are questioning what the bigger picture is supposed to be. But even with that skiing clip out there, the questions haven't gone anywhere. They've actually gotten louder. There's still that separate photo of Harry clearly enjoying himself on the slopes with Eugenie. There's still no solid, visible proof that Meghan was even on that trip. Yet the content is being presented like a full family holiday, clean and complete, when the details don't fully back that up. And that's where people start connecting dots, because this isn't the first time the Sussex communication style has been questioned. There's a pattern critics keep pointing to, moments where things are presented as they should look, not necessarily as they fully are. Think about past examples people still bring up. The Africa narrative, the Sandringham situation that was framed one way but didn't quite land that way in reality, the Netflix deal described as a creative partnership when it functioned more like a structured commercial agreement. Now, this Easter skiing content is being added to that list as another moment where presentation and reality might not be perfectly aligned. Now shift the lens, because the Beatrice and Eugenie angle deserves a more human look, not just strategy and optics.
Firstly, Emily Ferguson revealed that Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, was expected to attend the Easter Sunday service, but she wasn't there, just said that she was under the weather, while apparently Lady Louise, her and Prince Edward's daughter, was busy with her studies and was never going to be there. So that is a standard absence, I think we can say.
These are two adults with their own lives. They've built careers, families, reputations. By all visible accounts, they've kept distance from the issues surrounding their father. They haven't been seen publicly supporting or engaging with the situation that brought all that scrutiny. They're not showing up at Royal Lodge. They're not tied to that controversy in any active way. Yet they're still being handled as if they're direct extensions of it. That's where things start to feel complicated on a personal level. William's position is firm. No attendance at events where York family members are present. But that stance doesn't separate Andrew and Sarah's history from their daughter's conduct. It treats the entire family as one unit when it comes to managing risk to the institution. From a strategic angle, you can understand it, but on a human level, it's not so simple. Charles sees it differently, and you can feel that contrast. His instinct is to protect, to keep them included, to invite them to events like Ascot and maintain that family connection. He's looking at them as individuals who didn't choose their circumstances and can't rewrite their father's past. And by most accounts, before everything surrounding Andrew escalated, Beatrice and Eugenie were seen as reliable, consistent, and respectful in their roles. They showed up, did the work, and carried themselves well. So this tension between William and Charles? It's not just politics or control. It's a real disagreement about fairness. Where should accountability land? How far should consequences extend? And at what point do individuals stop being defined by the actions of their parents? Those aren't simple questions, and right now, the monarchy doesn't seem to have one clear answer. There's no clean, simple answer to this. And that's exactly the problem. The mixed signals around Easter and Ascot aren't sluchai. They reflect how difficult this situation really is to resolve. But what is clear? The current approach. These back and forth messages, these competing leaks from different palace sides, isn't working for anyone. Beatrice and Eugenie are stuck in the middle of it. One week they seem included, the next they're out of the picture. How are they supposed to plan anything, public roles, appearances, even their future? When the rules keep shifting like this, it creates uncertainty, and that uncertainty shows. And it's not just them. The monarchy itself takes a hit when its messaging doesn't line up. You can't project stability and confidence if different parts of the same institution are telling completely different stories at the same time.
And that's why what we have seen is William, and I've reported on this obviously extensively, taking control, but it was a really obvious example of that at the weekend. And for Charles's PR team, not a great day, you could argue, because of course those front pages, which I showed you earlier in the segment, completely dominated by William and Catherine.
That kind of contradiction chips away at credibility, slowly but surely. Then there's Charles and William, and this is where it gets even more serious. They need a functional, aligned working relationship to manage the transition into the next era. But if major decisions are being fought out through media briefings instead of handled privately and clearly, that foundation starts to crack. At some point, a firm call has to be made and explained properly. Either Beatrice and Eugenie are being moved toward a more permanent distance with clear reasoning and a defined future role, or they remain part of the core family circle with expectations and boundaries spelled out. Right now, it's neither. It's a blurred line that keeps shifting. What we're seeing instead is a kind of institutional confusion dressed up as strategy. Easter exclusion tied to one side, Ascot invitations tied to another. It's not a plan, it's a tug of war. And that tug of war is doing more damage than a clear decision in either direction ever would. Now, looking at the bigger picture, William does come across as the more decisive operator here. His approach is sharper, more focused, more aligned with a streamlined vision of the monarchy. When his side communicates, it tends to be direct, controlled, and purposeful. His idea, a leaner institution, centered strongly around the Wales, family as the main public face. Charles, by contrast, leans toward keeping a broader family circle intact, even when that includes people whose associations have become complicated. It's a more traditional, more inclusive instinct, but it's also harder to manage cleanly in today's climate. That said, being consistent doesn't automatically mean being right. William's hard line on the York family might sound solid now, but holding that line over time could get tricky, especially when real-world pressures kick in. Take Ascot, for example. It's a major public event, and the York princesses have been regulars there for years. If they suddenly don't appear, people will notice instantly. And if the headlines shift from the event itself to questions about internal royal conflict, then enforcing that stance at that moment might actually backfire. So yes, those Easter front pages, they clearly reflected William's vision. Strong, unified, forward-looking. But the real test is what comes next. Can that same clarity hold up under pressure from Charles's more inclusive approach, from the York family's long-standing presence?
A graph display of royal unity, hierarchy, and legitimacy. To pre-announce that you will be including the York princesses, there is a clear statement that Charles sees them as still within the fold. So what you are seeing here today is the acting out of the conflict of two competing courts. On one side, Charles, conciliatory, familial, inclined to preserve a sense of unity above all. On the other, William.
And from a public that often sympathizes with individuals who seem to be dealing with consequences tied to someone else's actions, that's where the story is heading. And that's where things could either lock into place or get even more complicated. Those Easter morning front pages told a powerful story, one of stability, continuity, and a future that looks locked in place. But the real question is what happens next. Were those images a true reflection of where things stand, or just a perfectly timed snapshot hiding the complications underneath? Because those complications, they haven't gone anywhere. The reality is the monarchy is still dealing with multiple unresolved pressures, all happening at once. Yes, the image of William, Catherine, and their 3 children walking towards St. George's Chapel is real, and it does matter. It's a strong symbol of what the future could look like. But a single moment, even one that lands on every front page, can't carry the whole institution forward. The future isn't built on images alone, it's built on decisions, and right now some of the biggest decisions are still hanging in the air. What happens with the York family? What direction does the Andrew situation take? Is there any real path forward with Harry and Meghan? And maybe most importantly, how do you reconcile 2 different visions for the monarchy that aren't fully aligned yet? Easter gave a glimpse of the destination, but the road to get there is anything but simple. And when you put those polished Windsor images next to the Montecito clips, the back of the head shots, the carefully controlled glimpses, it creates a contrast that's hard to ignore. That contrast alone sums up where both sides stand right now. But there's an even bigger layer to all of this, the question of Charles's reign itself and what it's becoming under pressure. He stepped into the role under incredibly difficult circumstances, No one would choose to take the throne in the shadow of a 70-year reign ending. The expectations were massive, and the timing even tougher. The monarchy was already navigating serious challenges: the Sussex exit, the Andrew situation, ongoing debates about relevance in the modern world. And still, Charles stepped in with clear intent and a sense of duty. In those early months, there was real public support behind him. Then, everything shifted. The cancer diagnosis didn't just affect him personally, it changed the entire rhythm of the monarchy's transition. It introduced uncertainty at the exact moment stability was needed most. A king dealing with serious health challenges can't always provide the kind of sharp, consistent leadership these situations demand. And that reality creates space that didn't exist before. So now you have William watching all of this unfold in real time. And that puts him in a difficult position. How far does he step forward with his own vision? How much does he push for change? And how much does he hold back out of respect for his father's reign? That balancing act is happening right now, behind every public appearance, behind every decision about who stands where, who shows up and who doesn't. And it's exactly why those clean, confident Easter images, while powerful, don't tell the whole story. And then there's the Montecito content, the back of the head shots, the teasing little reveals, the skiing clip full of unanswered questions. Was this a calculated move by the Sussex operation to stay in the spotlight using the tools they have right now?
I do think it comes in large part from a lack of clear leadership by Charles at the top. And William is attempting to the best he can to try to right the royal ship, because Charles is he's just withering. He just doesn't know quite what to do. I don't think this is the reign he envisioned for himself, and he just can't seem to adjust. William is attempting to do what he can.
It definitely looks that way. But here's the thing. Those tools were never going to outshine Windsor. Not even close. The Polish, the history, the emotional pull of those images, that's on a completely different level. Still, the attempt itself says a lot. It shows the Sussex side feels the need to stay visible, to stay in the conversation, to appear alongside the Wales family, even if the impact just isn't the same. And this isn't a one-time thing. More content will come, more moments will be pushed out, more efforts to stay relevant will follow. The Australia retreat will bring headlines, the court decisions will spark fresh attention, and all of it will keep feeding into this bigger, ongoing story. Meanwhile, the monarchy keeps moving through its own pressure points. Charles balancing his instinct for inclusion, William holding a firmer line, the York family sitting in that uncertain middle ground, and the Sussex operation continuing to push for space in the narrative. But Easter Sunday made one thing very clear. The Windsor story, the future of the monarchy, visible, steady and united, is stronger than all the noise surrounding it. The front pages proved it. The public reaction backed it up. And even the contrast from Montecito in its own way reinforced it. Because when the competing image is limited to partial glimpses and controlled moments, it only makes the Windsor picture look even more complete, even more grounded. That destination, what the monarchy is shaping into, is closer than it might have seemed before. Yes, this is still a complicated moment. Yes, there are unresolved tensions. But the image that came out of Easter, that was the right one, and the people in it are clearly positioned to carry that forward. Everything else, the mixed messaging, the behind-the-scenes friction, the unanswered questions, it's background noise compared to that signal, which for the first time in a while feels sharp and focused. So keep your eyes on what happens next. Watch how William shapes the future, how communication strategies evolve, and whether that sense of clarity actually sticks or starts to crack under pressure, because the destination is now visible, even if the path is still being built step by step. If you made it this far, drop a like, hit subscribe, share this with someone who's been following the story, and comment your thoughts below, because this conversation is far from over.